everyone, and welcome back to the Blaise XPerience once again. You are joining us for another episode, and I'm your host, Derreck, as always. And today we have a great episode. We're going to talk some Heartland DLC and State of Decay 2. This DLC was just released this week, and I'm really excited to talk about this. I've been playing a lot of it, and I've already made it through one playthrough. I'm about to start my second one, and I'm really excited to talk to the guests we have on today. Before we announce that, just real quick, we have our next podcast coming up next Saturday. It's going to be Heartland related in some degree. There's a lot of stuff in Heartland, so I'm not sure what topic I'm going to go with yet. I might go with, talking about the different characters in Heartland, or maybe the Plague Walls and all that new stuff there, but we'll figure it out. So it'll be something Heartland related. And the next stream, I can't quite announce the next stream just because I don't know exactly when I'm going to release this episode. But our usual stream schedule is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 12 to 4 Eastern, and then one night stream per week. And then real quick, last at the top of the show, I just want to thank everyone for helping us get over 500 followers on Mixer this week. That is really awesome, and I really appreciate that, everyone. But without further ado, we do have two guests here today. We have some guests from Undead Labs. Both of them are designers from Undead Labs. Please welcome back to the podcast. First, Geoffrey Card. How are you, Geoffrey?
I'm doing okay.
Welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Oh, this is fun. It's weird hearing you speak at a normal speed, because I always listen to the podcast at 1.5 times, and having you talk like a normal human is rough.
Trust me, I do the same. It makes things go faster. You can listen to more podcasts that way. So
exactly.
I'm the same way. But we also have another returning guest. They're actually on for an interview once as well. Please welcome back to the podcast, Brian and Giaime. How are you, Brian?
Hello, I'm good.
Thanks for coming back. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But we did have Heartland released this week, so how has the hype and the excitement been after the release for all of you?
I mean, it's actually kind of a big relaxation.
It's like a giant exhale.
Yeah, exactly.
Studio-wide.
I mean, you've heard me, on our stream every week, getting asked the question, when are we going to get to have Trumbull Valley? When are we going to have Trumbull Valley? And I kept not being able to give any information because we were preparing for this huge E3 surprise release. And so being able to suddenly talk about everything all at once.
It's not like there was like a small drip. It was nothing, everything at once.
Exactly. But that's a good way to do it, too. I mean, that worked really well for Apex Legends, for example, so sometimes that works really well, just, kind of a surprise drop like that. And I think the hype has been really, exciting for that because no one was really expecting it. It's like, oh, wow, here this thing is, let's go play this.
Yeah, I watched the video of Arky's Gamecast reaction, which was pretty hilarious. He had been predicting that it was going to be announced, and then when it suddenly was already out, he started flipping out. It was really fun.
Yeah.
I pretty much just kept refreshing Reddit or State of Decay for like 20, 30 minutes as people were like, oh, they're talking about stuff. And wait, did they just say it's out now? New thread, update, it's out now! And there's just this giant ongoing, I'm downloading!
Yeah, so that was awesome. So
yeah.
I've definitely been streaming it a lot lately, and all week I've been playing it. I honestly can't put it down. It's such a great DLC, so thank you the whole team for that.
Well, thank you.
It's wonderful to hear.
But I do have some questions for you about Heartland, and a couple of them I think I might know kind of the general answer to, but I think there's a lot of people out there that might have questions about it still, so I figured I would ask them. So one of the questions I had is, I did notice when I was looking at my radio commands, there's no longer radio commands for the Daybreak or Independence Pack or the Wizard Band, anything like that, so we can't actually use our radio commands from the base game. And is there a reason for that?
So there's a couple of pieces to this. It's useful to think about it not like, why can't this radio command be used in Heartland? We looked at it more like, well, why should this radio command be usable in Heartland? It was more like we brought stuff into it, we didn't cut stuff out of it. Like, the hope was always to make Heartland feel like it is its own distinct thing. It's got a new place, it's got its own characters, it's got its own story, it's got its own base. Like, there's an opportunity there to present something that is focused and deliberate, and it's easy to undermine a focused, deliberate thing if you start to say, well, why can't it also incorporate these 12 cool things that exist for different reasons that we thought up a year ago in a totally different context. And so like having on both like a balance front and like a narrative coherence front, having access to all of that stuff would mostly have just distracted from like the newness and the value of the actual product. And so it was more an exercise of looking at everything we had and saying, is this foundational enough to State of Decay 2 that the game doesn't work without it? Or is this something that is actually there for other reasons where we can safely take it off the table?
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because, I mean, when I was thinking about it, at first I was kind of surprised. I'm like, oh, wow, I can't call in, like, a Burdinator or something. But then I thought about it, I'm like, well, the Burdinator doesn't really fit with this story. Like, this is kind of a self-contained story, and I think it makes more sense just being its own little thing, kind of.
Yep.
But another question that's kind of similar to that is, we only have one base in Heartland, which you mentioned. So what kind of went into that decision behind that, and at what point in the process was that decision made? Was that early on in the process you guys knew that you only wanted one base?
It was fairly early. Like, there were a lot of discussions about this. I remember at one point we were talking about maybe having 2 or 3. Like, we knew we were never going to go to the same degree as a full map because you probably aren't going to spend as much time here, and we don't want you to... The reason we wound up with one base is the same reason we knew we weren't going to do 6 bases, is that we wanted you to focus on the story in the end. And the more time we spend telling you, actually, you can't see what happens next because you have to go grind against the simulation to acquire stuff to keep your thing propped up, the less momentum the story gets, and the more your focus is diluted, and the more it ceases to be that focused and unique, different game experience we want Heartland to be. And so, this sort of like, we reduced this to its simplest element, which was, well, why should we ever have more than one base? And then once we started playing with the idea of one base, we started to get really excited about it. There were certain opportunities presented there. You may have noticed, like, there's lots of built-in facilities at Jurassic Junction, like ones that don't exist in the base game at all, where we have the luxury of taking advantage of knowing exactly where the facility is going to be, exactly where all the walls are. It doesn't have to fit perfectly into like a little 3x3 meter slot. And so the artist had this opportunity to sort of go nuts and make things like large in scale and clear in distinction from tier 1 to tier 2, and to really have the sense of a big, living, thriving community that was very capable in a way that is just harder to do when you have to make the same artwork in, what is it, 21 or 22, however many bases we wound up with, different circumstances.
Right, yeah.
And so there started to be a lot of benefits to just doing the one, not least of which was time, right? You can make one thing a lot better than you can make 2 things, then you can make 3 things, and so forth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have to think, from your perspective, it must have been a little bit easier in some respects to have one base to focus on, and then you don't have to focus on, okay, I have to make this base balance with this base. You don't have to worry about balancing issues as much if you have one base to worry about.
That's exactly true. It's ultimately the less different pieces you need to be viable choices, the more interesting you can make each choice, and the more of your total complexity budget can be crammed into one place. And so that freed us up enough that we were able to literally say, hey, what if every single character had a unique unlock or a unique build? And we were able to accommodate that because it wasn't having to compete with like multiple different combinations of built-ins and multiple bases, and it just simplified the whole problem by like an order of magnitude.
Definitely, and I know on stream, Geoffrey has kind of said that, when a lot of people ask about having Trumbull in the base game, part of the issue with that is that there would be some balancing issues there where if you bring Trumbull to the base game, well, there's a new base in Trumbull that works totally different than all the other bases, and it wouldn't really be balanced with what your experience in the base game is with having that one base like that.
Exactly. It's not even like there's one base. There's one base that was designed to have an entirely different facility build menu with different unlocks based on different skills, based on different characters. Like, a lot of the benefits you get from saying this is distinct and can be its own thing mean that those things do not translate directly from that new context to the old context. And even if you were to say, like, oh, we'll just bring that over, like, that's basically the same amount of work as creating them from scratch. Because the balance considerations are different, the way you acquire them is different, the tuning considerations are different. Like, it has, like, there's a power to making something special for Heartland, and that we can make it so memorable and so distinct because we don't also have to keep it compatible with the ever-increasing complexity of the content that we have in the base game.
Absolutely, and I just have to say that, seeing that base and all the new stuff with it, when I first saw that, I was just floored. Like, wow, this is completely different. Like, still to this day, I still don't have everything down pat. Like, okay, this does this does this. I'm still figuring it out, so.
I'm smiling ear to ear. That was literally the point. Like, that's the thing you purchase by saying this is going to be unique and different, is we give ourselves the aspiration of saying, no, people should feel delighted to go and see all of this new stuff because it should be new enough, big enough, different enough to really resonate. So thank you for that. That was great.
You're welcome. And I was even noticing how the icons are different too. Like the hand center icon's different. Like, it was really cool seeing the new icons like that too. I'm like, oh wow, they even changed the icons. Like, they really went all out of the space.
We didn't change it. It's a new thing. It's like there's different data. It's a different facility. It's not. It's the same, but X. It's no. Let's create an entirely separate thing for Heartland.
Yeah. So that's really, really cool, and I really appreciate that. But Geoffrey, I know there's a lot of new characters in this as well. So how was you working on new characters like that? Was it kind of easier to work on them since they're a little bit more finite and you can kind of mold them a certain way instead of having a random generator, or was it more difficult in that sense?
It's interesting because, I mean, in one sense, the stage where we are sort of conceiving the characters and developing who the individuals are, it wasn't easier or harder. It was just a completely different challenge, because, in the base game, all of the characters are randomly generated. We don't create any of the characters except for, I guess, the few handful of starter characters. But even they have some, they've got a lot that's locked down, but there's still a lot of variance in those guys. And so the problem of trying to create basically a factory for generating characters versus creating specific characters is just a completely different challenge. And one thing that was actually a little bit harder is the fact that our data systems are set up in such a way that they're built specifically for the problem of creating molds for characters, or creating a type of character and then iterating on that type again and again and again, like hammering out 500 different different characters who are good at athletic pursuits or something like that. It's not designed for creating a specific character with a specific name and a specific appearance. So we had to take all of our systems and kind of bend them out of shape in order to make these individual characters. Like, our name list, for instance, is, it's divided up by cultural backgrounds. You've got a different name list for people from Mexico versus people whose background comes from China or from Vietnam or from all these different places. And then we've also got entire cultural categories for each individual character in Heartland, because each of them, because we weren't randomly generating them as sort of a member of a larger group. We were just trying to create a very specific person, but the only way we have to define a name for a character is with a massive list of names that's grouped by culture. And so trying to make just individual characters who got the same name every single time actually meant that we had to double the size of our name list just to make room for this handful of 14, 17, 18 characters, something like that. Oh, wow. So yeah. So it was just on the surface it looks like it's a much simpler system. Under the hood it looks like garbage. But we made it work, and there were definitely some times where characters got weird names. I actually originally put in temporary fake names for the characters, and we ended up with a few weird save game bugs where people who were playing the game very close to release would still end up somehow getting my temp names on their characters. And so I'm trying to remember what some of their names were. I don't know. Like Brock's name might have been something like Speedo McMethlab or something like that. I don't, it wasn't that, but it was something along those lines. And people,
I remember seeing in Slack someone's like, is this gonna ship like that? Is that what's supposed to
is that his actual name? For a long time, Diana's name was just Lizard. And they made me change that one because it was kind of weird. But yeah, so it was different. I wouldn't say easier or harder, but it definitely, it looks weird under the hood.
It felt a lot like we took a hammer and had to hit a bunch of screws with it.
Yes, exactly. That's, or trying to screw in a bunch of nails or something like that, yeah.
No, it's really interesting though. I'm glad you kind of went through that, because on the surface it seems like, okay, we just have, these 8 or 10 characters and, we just have to mold them the way we want. But on the surface, it seems like, oh, that's not as bad as, molding, these different templates for all these random generated characters in the base game. But it's really interesting to hear about that from behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Which I know all these fifth skills these characters have, they all seem to have a different fifth skill. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we made a unique fifth skill for each of these characters.
Yep.
I've actually got our spreadsheet open here. Brian and I kind of made a Google spreadsheet so that we could constantly, and we kept it constantly up to date. So as I was making changes to the characters, he could look at it. As he was making changes to the facilities, I could look at it. And we were constantly sharing information back and forth so that any change we made would always be consistently reflected across both the facility system, which belonged to Brian, and the character system, which belonged to me.
I feel like this was the most aggressively collaborative thing we've had to do on this project.
Yeah, probably.
Every single time one of us wanted to iterate or tweak something, the other had to know about it so that everything could stay coherent.
Yeah, and so we came up with this document, which actually worked really well. And it turns out I actually want to keep doing this for everything I do from now on, because it was so useful to QA.
Right.
Because we had, instead of just writing documentation up front and then varying from it and just going wild and having all the documentation get out of date, which is the standard in the game industry, we kept this documentation constantly up to date because it was a necessary communication tool between us. And then once we were done and we were ready for QA to come in and test all of this stuff, they had a meticulous outline of exactly what was supposed to be in the game, and they could go through and make sure that if we had left anything out or made a mistake or made a change that we didn't report, they called out every single one of them. We were able to get all the characters down pat because we had documented it so well.
Yeah, I was going to say that must have been really interesting, that the collaboration effort there, because on one hand you have a new fifth skill, but that fifth skill has to do a certain thing in the base, and how did that kind of collaboration work exactly? When are you, okay, I want a facility in the base that does this, how can we make a fifth skill around that? How does that kind of work?
I think we started with the array of different things that could be done with the base.
It was almost character driven in my memory. Like, it was really like, we had a list of, like, we know we need to get the following things done on the base.
Yeah.
What do we want each of these people to contribute in a way that makes them, like, sufficiently valuable and also, like, identifiable, where it's a distinct thing? Yeah, and then we sort of chopped the dice to the base stuff that we knew we could do into, like, what belonged to each person.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it was like a matching game where, like, okay, we know that, for instance, that the Wilkersons are well known for drugs and explosives. And so whoever we recruit from the Wilkersons, which turned out to eventually be Brock, whoever we recruit from them has to be good at, fire and drugs. And so we put fire and drugs in his category. And we went down the list like that. We're like, okay, we want the characters, when we're choosing between two characters, we want them both to do approximately the same thing and for it to be a really key part of the base. We're like, okay, let's make them the doctors and give them two different backgrounds that have to do, and then we ended up with Vic and Isaac. And so we just filled those in, and then eventually we were left with, okay, there's a handful of more things we need to be able to do. We got to have somebody who's good at cooking, somebody who's good at utilities, and we sort of made that match up as well as we could with the characters we had left until we had this sort of full roster of facilities and a full roster of characters.
And there were like multiple loops to this, where we'd start off with an idea of like, well, it'd be really cool if the base could do this, who could we put that on? And then we would put that in, and then it would be, well, this character has this extra element to, like, their backstory. Can we incorporate that somehow and pay that off? And that would, like, manifest as, like, new facility passives or actions or stuff like that. Like, originally, there's the utilities-based thing that Chavez unlocks.
Whatever that was called.
Is it just utilities?
Utilities complex.
Utilities complex, that's what it was.
I have 5 different versions of that name in my head and always forget which one they actually ship. So the utilities complex originally was like, we knew it was going to do power and water because there's the idea that as you move further in Heartland and you recruit more people, you sort of get like to upgrade your way out of worrying about simulated resource problems so you can focus on the gauntlet, which I don't think is too much of a spoiler, but if you're listening to this podcast, odds are good these are words you've heard before.
Right.
But like we also thought about that, and then eventually it's like, well, he's got this whole like, I was the guy who built stuff for my community, and eventually I looked at it and went, well, some people in playtest were also building staging areas, and I didn't want to waste 2 large slots. So it's like, Chavez could just let you could just solve that. And so we actually like grabbed the passive off the staging area that knocks out your materials income and slapped it on the utilities complex. I believe it is only there if Chavez has survived.
That makes sense, yeah.
And it kind of makes sense too, because I mean, Chavez is a red talent, so it makes sense that you pair utilities with him.
Because we were kind of I went through the 5th skill list for the red talon characters and tried to find what are the interesting things that red talon characters are capable of doing. And I like the idea that they have this sort of like this pioneer class of soldiers that they bring in who are, they're not necessarily combat experts. They're people who are experts in kind of, I don't know, a post-apocalyptic equivalent of nation building. And that I liked the idea of applying that to Chavez. And then once we applied that to Chavez, we kind of realized, okay, so having him be the non-combat guy who was brought into a daybreak operation, and that he was the one who was not really prepared for how intense that was. And so he's the one who runs away. Like, it's like, the role we gave him on the facility side fed into who he was as a character, which then fed into his mission and his story, and fed back into his role in the community. And so it kind of, this whole thing was very circular and iterative.
Which, speaking of those missions and everything, I actually didn't realize it till it was too late, but some of these characters, which we don't have to spoil which ones exactly, but there's a couple of these characters that you actually could miss the chance to recruit. Was that something that was always planned to happen? Because there was a character in my first playthrough I missed recruiting because I didn't get there in time to do the mission.
Yeah, there was, so the way we structured it was there was a certain handful of characters that were a part of the main storyline. There's the characters you start with, there's Malik who you meet, at the base, and there are characters you can get from the personal storyline, from, either the Wilkerson or the Santos storyline, and then there's the character you get, for sort of the endgame stuff. And so those were going to be sort of the core main line. We knew that you were going to encounter those characters and get opportunities to recruit those characters. And so those storylines belonged to Leah and Kale, who are a couple of our, mission designers. And then I was brought in to be the mission designer who made all of the storyline, all of the stories that didn't have anything to do with the main storyline. So, Reba and Chavez and Isby and Vic and Isaac, and I'm forgetting one. Diana, thank you. And so those were mine. And because, the reason we did that was because I was also working on Content Update 8 at the same time, that I was working on Heartland. And so there was no way that I was going to be able to, just get as involved in the larger storyline and really know what's happening as the short storyline shifted and as major things were going on. I wasn't going to be able to keep up with all of that stuff. And so I was given all the missions where I didn't need to know what was going on. And each mission could sort of stand on its own. And so there was always kind of this division between the core mainline characters and the side recruits. So those 5 or 6 characters that were in my wheelhouse, it's known that many players might not ever encounter them. Like if you never happen to go near Chavez's little hollow that he's living in, you'll never find Chavez. If you don't happen to drive by Reba's house when we're at the point in the story where she wants to engage with you, you don't meet Reba. You know, if you don't run into Diana just by chance, you'll never meet Diana.
That's the one I missed. I missed Diana the first time. So.
Yeah, she's in a very tight area. You kind of have to know where to go.
But like on the other side of that, like the base build menu specifically calls out.
That's true.
Here's the thing that you could have if you find an expert in something, and so even if you might have missed the character, our hope was always that we would at least like plant the seed in your brain that all right, somebody somewhere does this, so I should keep an eye out and I should look and I should explore. And the hope was to sort of motivate players to like try and like see all that there is to see and find all that there is to find, and to make sure that they were always rewarded for doing so with something unique and distinct.
Yeah, which is something you can't really do as easily in a very procedurally generated game because, you know, in the base game, it's basically an engine for spitting out content for you. And so because you know there's sort of an infinite amount of it coming your direction, there's nothing that feels like, well, I have to complete this or there's a piece missing. That sort of puzzle solving element really isn't there in a lot of the core game. And, you know, a lot of story focused players, a lot of collection focused players, really, really enjoy that. And it's something that they might not get from the base game, but they definitely get it in Heartland. We wanted to lean into the advantages, like we were saying before, lean into the advantages that Heartland gives us by being such a very specific story. It lets us, create those open slots that you want to fill and those mysteries that you want to solve.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you both brought up that part about the open slots and, a mystery that you might want to solve, or, oh, what does this do? I want to find the character that does this, because there's actually a couple of characters. There's the 2 storylines, the Wilkersons and the Santos storyline, which obviously they had different starting characters. But there's actually 2 other characters that are exclusive to the storyline. So Brock and Keisha you can only get if you play a certain storyline. So what went into the decision with that, and were you ever worried that, oh, well, I wanted to do this facility, but, Brock has that, I can never get Brock?
Well, didn't we put those on the same... You answer that.
So this one was a little bit tricky. We played with this at one point where we knew we wanted to have some sort of branching in there where it wouldn't feel like you had the same exact combat texture in both versions of the game. Like we want there to be a sense of, well, when you play as the Wilkersons, or sort of the Wilkerson storyline, these tools become available to you. When you play on the Santos storyline, these tools become available to you, so that when you replay it, it doesn't feel like you're doing exactly the same thing the same way. Right. And so we knew we wanted to do like an asymmetry there. We actually put in some custom tech to allow us to hide the upgrade on the screen, so you wouldn't see something you could never have. The intent being that when you're playing on one playthrough, that's just set in stone. This is what you get. These are the tools that you get. They're good. They're better than the base game, usually by a market amount. Like, we let you craft some stuff that you normally have to get as loot. Like, there's pursuit mines on one side, and I want to say, you can rent it. You can't craft Willy Pete, but you can craft a gamble, which has a chance of Willy Pete, which is unequivocally the best incendiary in the game and crazy good against stuff during the gauntlet. And we wanted you to feel like you had something equal in power on both sides, but that it wouldn't be the same. But we also didn't want you to think about it in terms of like, oh, I really wish I had this other thing. It's supposed to be, this is this crew, this is what they've unlocked, this is what they've given me. Let me go and experience it on these terms. And so the intent was to use the characters as scaffolding to sort of navigate why you had these powers versus these powers.
Well, that actually makes sense, yeah. And I'm kind of glad that you had that tech in there where you can't see it, because I was going to say, when I played through the Santos storyline, which is when I played through first, I didn't really notice, something that Brock could do. And I'm like, well, he does something, but I don't know what he does next.
Yeah, so there's no message at all about what Brock could possibly do if you're over on the Santos storyline, and Keisha is your only option.
Yeah, and I ended up liking Keisha. She's a pretty cool character, so.
yeah, we like it too.
Which, that actually brings me to, do you both have a favorite new character in this? Because I would say that mine is one of the ones that Geoffrey spoke of earlier, Isby. I found Isby so, unique and strange, but she's strange in a fun way, and I really enjoyed her personality.
Well, you nailed my favorite one. Isby was was probably my favorite thing that I did on Heartland was Isby's mission. Partly because I initially kind of based Isby on one of my daughters. You notice that she's got the inside person trait, which is completely based on, that's the trait that gives her so much red, in her traits, because she just never goes outside. She never does anything athletic. And I've actually got a kid who prides herself on never going outside. And so I based that on her. And so I have a special affection for that, but also, that the sort of plot line of that mission. I did a few things in that mission that we hadn't quite handled an objective in exactly that way before, and it just sort of made me feel clever going through and making that mission. But especially the very first line that you say when you're on the rooftop of the gas station. And you're saying just word salad into your radio to try to get Cleo's attention. That line is actually a line. It's one of my favorite Fry and Laurie sketches. It's a line that
I love this so much.
It's a line that Stephen Fry says. So basically he's playing an English professor and he's making this point about how, there's a finite number of words in the English language, but you can say an infinite number of sentences with them. And he said, I'm going to say a sentence right now that has never been spoken before in the history of the English language. Hold the newsreader's nose squarely, waiter, or friendly milk will countermand my trousers. And I loved that so much because it was so absolutely true. I mean, now, of course, it's been said millions of times by people who are fans of Stephen Fry. But at the time, no one had ever said that before except Stephen Fry. And it was so great that this is actually the second video game I've snuck that line into. The first one was The Sims 2 for PSP. It was a secret line you spoke to mind control a robot, I believe.
I feel like if we were making games in the 90s, you could use that as your console cheat.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that would be your rosebud, like semicolon, exclamation point for infinite something. Although every time I read that line, I hear it in Brock's voice.
Oh yeah.
Because that's the first time I heard it in the game, and the voice actor did a great job. Where he's just very increasingly confused the further into the sentence he gets, countermand my trousers? It's like, what could that... And it was one of the more immersive moments for me because that line happens and then spoiler, and I was with the character in that moment where I'm like, where is this going? What is it? Oh, okay, nope, yep, I'm on board now. I get it.
Well, I think that's kind of why I was so drawn to Isby, too, because that feeling you get, you're just standing on a rooftop, you're like, what am I saying? Why am I here, saying this nonsense? What am I doing with my life
so
right
ready
now?
to believe that, the character's completely nuts, this is going to go nowhere, this is some insane task, and then, nope.
Yeah. And I like Isby's voice actress did such a great job of sort of selling this hyper-confidence where it's like, you kind of feel like you should keep doing it because this character is so sure she's right. And you could just as easily believe that she's an insane person because only an insane person is as confident of nonsense as she is.
It's definitely this person is from deep in the bowels of the internet.
Yeah, exactly. But, and I also have a special feeling in my heart for Isby because in the zombie apocalypse, I would also be the person who physically is terrible at everything, but knows something about computers. And so I'm kind of hoping that someone would find some use for my skills in the zombie apocalypse.
I'm going to build a fortress and then try to market my skill set externally.
Yeah, exactly. So Isby's my favorite. Who's your favorite?
It's tough because I remember it has varied. It's a little bit. I'm definitely a weirdo in that I have memories of them being my favorites because of the crap they unlock because I focus on the abstract parts of games.
That's a good enough reason.
But also, Brock has a golden deagle and a skull belt buckle and he's a weirdo. And I kind of his character is a delight. I think I got gunslinging on him in mind. I don't know if that's every time.
That sounds legit.
He was my favorite.
I'll check
Geoffrey's
the
now
spreadsheet.
checking the spreadsheet that literally tells us this. But I remember the part where I was trying to get Brock's hero bonus was probably the most fun I had just because his dialogue, his character, just his overall appearance, and also his mechanics all gelled really well for me. It looks like he gets either weapon handling or gunslinging. And so I was just running around gunslinging with my gold eagle being a weirdo on the radio, and I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, he's vaguely based on Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad.
He also literally has one of our coworkers' faces.
Yes, that's true.
There's a guy in the office who just is Brock with normal people clothes. And it's the strangest thing in the world.
And personality-wise, nothing like Brock.
0%. But it's just his face and his hair, and he's a programmer. He's just making video games all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces of him on a stream, but I haven't played that storyline yet, so I'm excited to meet him the full depth of him. So
he's a fun dude.
Yep. There's some great dialogue. Can I keep him? There's just so much great dialogue.
Which, going back to Isby real quick, I thought it was interesting too that she seems to be the only character that actually can't specialize in all of her traits. So was that intentional by her?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
She's
because
right?
we limited her, in, I think, her physical abilities. And, I mean, yeah, basically, most of the characters we wanted to have a normal level of survivor flexibility. We wanted her to stand out as being kind of a glass cannon. It's like she can expand your outpost limit. She can get you Cleo drops. She's got, this really valuable thing to offer, but it comes at a cost. You'll notice that one thing we did, this time around is nearly all of the characters, basically everyone except for your starters, has some kind of serious. Oh, actually, no. Even your starters have got. Yeah, I forgot about this. Even your starter characters have got downsides. And this kind of dates back to one of the issues that we had with the Red Talon recruits was the fact that we made, this was a mistake on my part. I made the characters so perfect, that really there was, the dominant strategy of our game was to just fill your community entirely with Red Talon characters. And I realized, I started paying attention to the way that people were generating their characters, and I noticed that not only were they going after Red Talon characters, but people would, they would cycle through characters forever until they found characters who had only good traits. And if any character had a negative trait, there's a lot of people who are just like, throw them in the garbage if they've got a negative trait. And for me, in my mind, I liked the fact that in our game, our characters are not perfect superheroes. Our characters are not generally, ideal people because, you know what, in real life, there isn't a single one of us that doesn't have a negative trait. Every real human in the real world has got something that would have red text if we were a State of Decay character. And so, I really, really like the idea of always getting a positive from a character, but also having to deal with a negative and sort of balancing that out and having this sense that nobody's perfect. And so just because somebody has a little bit of a negative trait, that doesn't mean they're garbage. It doesn't mean you need to throw them away. Everyone's valuable, in their own way. And so, when we were planning out these characters, I deliberately made sure that everyone has got something that's negative. And actually, oh wait, no, I was wrong looking at this thing. I saw some red text. The starter characters do not have negatives, and part of that was because you actually do make an upfront choice looking at their traits, right, deciding which pair of characters you want to have. Yeah. And because there's such a strong bias in the community towards just rejecting characters who have any red or anything that looks bad, that we wanted to make sure that people weren't sort of inhibited from selecting their favorite characters based on that assumption.
But that principle is definitely one that would resonate well in a broad way where applied. It's definitely something that we've just made a clear observation of looking at the way people play the game versus the sort of intentions we had. So it's a good thing to learn.
Yeah, so it's sort of a balance, right? Because you want to lean into what people are enjoying, what people are interested in. And so with the starter characters, we made sure that they kind of aligned with what players are looking for from characters. But then when you start recruiting characters in the game, then we kind of bring in that theme that, nobody's perfect, but everyone's valuable. And I think that's an important theme that we want to bring across. And so I'm glad that Heartland gave us the ability to do that.
Yeah, and at least for me, I can't speak for everyone else, obviously, but at least for me, the story of it kind of made me not really care about the negatives because, I'll use Isby again as an example. I know Isby has 3 stars in some areas, but, her personality and her confidence from that storyline, I'm like, hey, screw it. I'm going to play as Isby. We're going to not rock this. Isby's got this. So.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the target. I think she's got a target pistol. I really like the target pistol anyway. And so,
I mean, she's got to get that outpost limit somehow.
Yeah.
Exactly. But another question I had going back to the bases real quick.
Sure.
So Jurassic Junction is really unique, obviously, and I wanted to know if it was a challenge to reconfigure everything on a system standpoint, because it seems like a lot of things that we're used to in the base game were kind of broken out into different facilities, and we have different things that do the same things we might be used to in the base game, but they're in different places now.
Yep. So that was very deliberate. One of my sort of long-standing, if I ever get the chance to do this, list items was to make the choices about where you spend your resources at your base more meaningful early. When we first started developing the game, exactly which facilities would be the ones that we kept and exactly what they would do shifted frequently, day to day, even week to week for a long time. And by the time all was settled and said and done, not having a workshop and not having an infirmary felt foolish. There wasn't really a good reason to ever do that. And so at the very least, I started by saying, well, I'd rather split those out, and then if you want to create or upgrade those things, those should be choices where all your ability to heal and all your ability to make useful stuff, we don't have to tie those together. If we tie those together, it feels foolish not to build this. And I don't want you to ever feel foolish for not doing something. I want you to feel like you're making a choice about where to extend in a positive way, not where to avoid a negative. That's what happens when you make too useful to effective dominant strategies, right? You stop gaining that sense of I made the right choice, because every choice is obvious. And so we knew that we were going to have a giant base. We knew we were going to have more slots. And so we basically looked at the stuff that we knew you would always build and basically just split it in half, where the depot and the lab share duties from what used to be on the workshop, and then the medical tent, and then the branching medical expansion upgrade that is unlocked by either Vic or Isaac has the rest of what you might have done on the infirmary. So one of them is more about crafting, one of them is more about recovery.
I like that expansion. That was cool.
Thank you. And so the hope was to sort of make those choices feel more consequential, and that there's also a greater sort of thematic element to that, like having a facility that does one thing. I do believe, having looked at the game for a while now, is generally stronger than a facility which does a whole ton of things. If no other reason, like you can intuit what's there, you can figure it out simpler, you can expect it, it's more sort of rewarding when you actually get it up. And then there's we basically wanted to make sure that everybody who you added to your community created something that was valuable and related to them. And so the other side of this was pulling stuff off of the sort of baseline assumptions of what you would get, so we could give them to you from the right person and make that person feel extra rewarding. Like the outpost limits, the drone strikes were a good one. We pulled the drone strikes off of the Heartland version of the radio room, so you could unlock them when you built the relay facility. So that, pretty sure that was Isby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so so that when you get Isby, like you get, like, she's got all the computer hacky stuff. You didn't have some of it with her and some of it without her. Like, no, like, why would anybody have that? That comes from your one and only hacking expert. You want to bring her in there because this is just the path to that. And when you have her, you've got all the stuff, and if you were to actually lose her after building that, you don't lose everything, but you lose some things, right? And so we needed to have enough on every facility to both incentivize you to build it and recruit the person, and then further incentivize you not to lose that person. And so there had to be, like, enough on every piece to do that. And so chopping up the stuff in the base game made it more reasonable to do so.
And one of the follow-ups I have to that then is, would any of these decisions kind of involve looking at player data? Because one of the first things I noticed is, based on the previous conversation we've had, Brian, the Forge kind of wasn't used a lot by people I talked to, and basically it looked like you rolled the Forge pretty much into Quincy's weapons area. So it basically, I noticed that right away, like, oh wow, all the Forge weapons are right here in Quincy's weapon area. So did you kind of take things that, like, oh well, people might not be using this as much, let's just kind of roll it into this section?
That was definitely a part of it. You want, at some level, like, you have to, when you're building content for a system like that, you have to set down what your goals are first. Like, you don't just make everything with the what would be cool. You have to set down, like, what is the purpose of this? And, like, every facility should have a reason why you would build it and should be rewarding for a certain reason. And you want those reasons to be as distinct as possible. We knew that we wanted Quincy to unlock the ability to, like, make a couple of firearms, and having a facility that made guns and then a different facility that made melee weapons felt like those were too similar, and it wouldn't feel good to have to do both to get both. And we could make it very rewarding to get the weapons depot upgrade, and thus very rewarding to have and keep Quincy alive if all that sort of came from one place. And so, that combined with the fact that we had sort of split the workshop in half meant that we could take the repair stuff and the weapon stuff and just be nice and tight on the focus with that.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I'm glad it was done that way, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Although, there is a part of it that would love to, like, look back at the Forge someday and maybe give that a little tweak. Like, everything should have a reason to exist.
Yeah, I hope that does happen at some point, because, I mean, the idea of a Forge sounds really cool, but I think just the execution could have used a different direction, maybe, so.
We'll keep thinking about it.
Yep.
But I did notice as well that if you compare Heartland to Nightmare, there's actually way more cars in Heartland. Was that a conscious decision as well to include more cars on the map?
Yep. Heartland's tuning was based on, in many ways, the tuning of Heartland was, let's start with a standard zone and then cautiously pull threads towards Dread in certain places at certain times. With Nightmare, we were very deliberate about making cars hard to come by so that the amount of the early game you spend without perfect access to a car is higher. The need for you to, like, find parts to repair them is higher, and the odds of you putting yourself into a precarious situation were higher, because that's, like, a main goal of the simulation when you're in sort of open-ended game. With Heartland, not having a car kind of just slows the story to a grinding halt, and it creates opportunities for you to get stuck on the side of the road, and we have enough VO for you to drive from point A to B, and so you'll hear a story for 2 minutes, and then you're just walking for, like, 9 more without a story happening, and then the story picks up when you get to your destination. And I had this experience a few times, and it just never... It felt so clearly bad that anything we could do to diminish the odds of that happening felt worthwhile. And what that manifested as is, don't change the amount of cars in there from the default tuning, which was both safe because we'd already mostly QA'd that, and easy because we know what the game feels like in that way. So that just helped us stay focused on the right stuff.
And did any of that with the cars have anything to do with the ability to actually call in cars? Because that's one thing I thought could have been partially factoring into that, where, oh, well, we can't call in cars from, Independence Pack anymore. We can't call in cars like the Wizard anymore. So because we can't call these in, maybe they actually put some more cars on the map. Was that part of that at all?
I don't think we actually considered that specifically, but if we had turned the cars down, we probably would have bumped into an issue because we didn't have that to backfill. I think we managed to just sort of put this blocker down, and then it kept that issue from ever really arising.
That makes sense. But I did want to ask you both as well, since there's so many new facilities, traits, and skills in here, what's, maybe one or two of your, like, favorite newest facilities or traits that you kind of came up with?
I already mentioned, I think my favorite trait is inside person on Isby. So I think I'll stick to my guns on that one.
Fair enough.
Sounds good.
I didn't think about as much about the traits, but I love the idea of the Fabricator Lab. I remember we wound up with a facility mod that was the CNC mill, and that basically just existed to make parts. But I've always loved the idea, because what is it? There was a book that Geoffrey actually, I think, bought from the studio and then handed to me very early on called The Knowledge, which was so great for us developing the game. I think we actually have that still there.
Oh yeah, there's a mission in the game where you find a copy of that book. We got permission from the author to actually represent his book in the game.
Yep, and it's like I think it's just a better than normal chemistry textbook. Like you get more stars out of it, but it covers a lot of like if you have to reboot industries from nothing, what do you do? What are the steps that you take? What are the things that you make? And so the image has always been in my head of like what happens when we've kind of succeeded at that. What does that look like? And then the Fabricator, I think it was Lab in the end. We debated the Chopper Lab. In the end, has all of this different sort of manufacturing capability. It's this person who's making like suppressors and then just tons and tons of parts, and you can even make like your own backpacks there. And there's always this sort of untapped potential of, well, we never let you craft everything. What haven't we left you craft yet? And then we just sort of kept putting things in there, and we threw like a durability bonus on it. And it felt like very rewarding for me to have the ability to say, hey, look, we've given you something that you haven't had before in the way that like identifies uniquely and you can see it from far away, and the value proposition feels really clear. And so I'm just very happy with that.
Yeah, I think for me, just a whole new like system to explore is really exciting for me because, I mean, I've already obviously podcasted about like the different bases in the base game, different facilities, things like that. Like Heartland is so different from all that I have to really take time to like dissect all this, and it's going to take me a little while to actually dissect. Okay, this does this, and like actually know by heart like what everything does.
That makes sense.
Yep. We're thinking of you when we made it.
I appreciate that.
You and a lot of players like you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. But one of the last few Heartland questions I had for you is just as something quick, what was something that was most challenging for either the studio as a whole in making this DLC or for your individual role? Either one.
Do you want to go first, or do you want to think about it?
Let me think about it.
Sure. So I can answer this one for me pretty easily. The amount of focus that you would have on playing the sort of day-to-day simulation loop versus actually focusing on the story was a very hard question to answer until the story was pretty far along, just because of the nature of developing a narrative experience in a game means that you can't get a great understanding of how it's going to feel at the end until pretty close to the end. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, well, how much loot should there be on the map, and how much scavenging do you expect the player to do, and how much resource pressure do you want me to feel? Because all that manifested for me in like, well, what does the base actually do? What do I give you? How do I make it feels like the right thing and not something that undermines the rest of the game? And so there's a reason that when you like max out the farming complex, you're getting like crazy food per day. You're also getting meds per day. The thing provides its own water. The utilities complex turns off your need for power, turns off your need for water for the whole base, and also turns off your need for materials. There's a facility that just gives you gas forever because it's you know, spoilers, it's the same thing with the cars, right? Because like not having fuel means everything slides to a halt. And so eventually this focus became really crystalline for me, where anything that was stopping you from moving the story forward was not making the product stronger. And so all the tuning was able to be sort of lined up against that bar of, this is what the goal of the tuning is, this is what the player's experience should be. And so once we got that, it became much clearer, like, all right, it's fine for the player to find lots of stuff, we can let you craft weapons that are crazy good, you'll need them at the end, we can turn off this pressure, and it'll all neatly dovetail into you being in this sort of, like, the image in my head was like, you're at the end of an RPG, and if you do a bunch of extra grinding, you should feel really, really powerful. And so I wanted the experience you had out in the world, getting ready to do the final story stuff, to have that sort of emotional journey in it.
Yeah, kind of like the grinding of the plague cure too, you know, because the plague cure was kind of reduced in cost that way, because you knew, okay, everyone's going to need a lot more plague cure, and everything is plague. So,
right, like randomly slapping you down with needing to farm that probably isn't going to help the story feel like it's got momentum.
True.
Over on my side, so I actually dodged one of the hardest things that sort of plagued the content design side. So Leah and Kale and Walter, who were all working on the core storyline missions, were dealing with a lot of brand new challenges because, you know, in the original in the core game, the way that we treat missions, you know, a mission pops up and you either take it or you don't, and if you ignore it, it goes away, and then another one will pop up in its place. Even the missions that are really important to completing the game, they can still come and go, and you've always got the chance for a new one to pop up in the future. And it doesn't really matter a whole ton that the exact right series of events always happens in the exact right order. Like we built a game intentionally where it could be just kind of random and it was okay. But in Heartland, it doesn't work that way. Like, everything has to happen in a very specific order. Certain things have to happen before other things, and the later things that happen have to happen fast enough that they make sense, and all the logic has to hang together. And we have to, we rely on certain characters being alive for certain things, and if they die, we have to do different things. And it's a level of complexity and mission and story management that we just plain sidestepped for the core game. And so I don't get to complain about it that much because I, deliberately was put on the missions that didn't need to worry about that, where each one really was kind of standing on its own, alone. Like, I had to sort of branch them off specific parts of the storyline, but otherwise they just kind of stood on their own and didn't need to sort of flow into each other all that much. They weren't very interrelated. But Kale and Leah and Walter, each time they needed to test one of their missions, they had to carefully advance through the story that other people had built in order to get to the right spot. And we had programmers, especially Peter Gentoli, spent a lot of time building us tools that made it a lot easier for us to step through the story and get to where we needed to get, where it only would take us 5 minutes instead of 45 minutes.
Especially if the bugs are like, well, if you make this choice here, and this choice here, and this choice here, and then this person died, this happens.
Yeah.
And so just getting that to be a part of someone's job that does not take half their day to even see what the problem is a challenge to overcome in that universe.
Yeah, so that was a really big deal. It's just basically anytime you build a set of tools to create one kind of game, and then you step to the side and decide to make a very different kind of game with those same tools, you're going to run into a lot.
There's a cost to
lot
pay
of problems.
one place or the other. Yeah,
but the people who were involved, especially, like Peter giving us those tools and everything, it went a lot better than I think the worst case scenario looked like.
I mean, absolutely.
Especially like by the end of that process, like, I was just powering through if I needed to test out, Reba's stuff, she's one of the later unlocked recruit characters. If I needed to test out problems with Reba, it only took me a few minutes to just power through the series of cheats that it took to get me to the point where she was ready to go. And I was really kind of, proud of our tools team for what they were able to come up with.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I do appreciate the kind of story progression that was set up with that, because it is something different. And like, one of the examples that I ran into is, until you're at a certain part in the story, you can't actually harvest the poison glands from bloaters. And I thought that was pretty interesting because, if you think about it, I mean, obviously as a player, if you played through it once already, all this is about. But if you're playing a new game, technically these characters wouldn't know how to do that yet until they play through that story.
I mean, there's also just like the pacing side of that, right? Where it doesn't feel as good to immediately start grinding everything you'll ever possibly need right away and hear none of the plot.
Right.
And so just not even like tempting you to spend your time that way until you're at a place where the game's overall tuning is prepared for it helps to keep the experience within like narrower bounds we have more control over, and generally just means, in our estimation, that most people are having a better time.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But I did have one other question for Heartland before we talk about a couple of other patch things real quick. Mm-hmm. So the last question I had is, in Heartland, I won't spoil the story for anyone that hasn't played through the whole story yet, but at the very end of the story, there is sort of a cliffhanger, and I do understand if this question can't be answered yet, but I kind of wanted to know if this is going to be resolved at some point. So is there going to be an arbitrary point in time where we actually find out what happens in this cliffhanger?
So the end of Heartland, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Year One Survival Edition, which is where we introduced Cleo. So for most of the life of the original State of Decay, at least for the first year and a half, Cleo was not a thing. It was just, look, we're in the zombie apocalypse in a couple of towns, and it was very kind of down to earth. And then in Yo's, we introduced this weird new element coming from the outside and deliberately did not explain it. And the reason we didn't explain it was because, at the time, we knew that we were starting State of Decay 2, and we really wanted to send a message to the audience that we weren't done. We wanted to communicate to people who were playing the game that, we wouldn't just start a mystery that we weren't intending to eventually pay off on. And so the fact that there was a new mystery being introduced in the last edition of the original State of Decay meant that we were committed to the franchise as a whole. And we would say that to players, people who tuned into our stream and stuff like that. We would let them know, the reason we did this was because we want you to understand that this franchise is continuing. And so, the cliffhanger at the end of Heartland is a really kind of a similar thing. We want players who play Heartland to understand that this franchise is going to keep growing, and it's going to keep, we're going to keep, supporting this franchise for a really long time. And I think there's no better way to communicate than to open questions and not quite close them yet.
Also, we get to read fan theories on the internet, which are the best.
That's true. I will say, part of my theory is I really don't trust Dr. Hoppus. She seems kind of shady to me. So
we'll see how that goes.
I think she's responsible somehow. We'll find out. But along with Heartland, there were some other changes that kind of came with this patch, so we can talk about some of those quickly. So there were some inventory changes. One of those is, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so the inventory changes mostly happened because when we were working on Content Update 8, Matthew Bozarth, our programmer who was working on the inventory stuff, he specifically, when we targeted one particular addition we wanted to make, which was when you are at your car and you've got the vehicle inventory open, you can transfer items from the vehicle, but you can't transfer them from your own inventory. And that just created this horrific user experience where you have to send things from your inventory into the trunk and then from the trunk into the base. And if you were driving like a Brogan or something, there's like 4 slots. It took forever and it was so obnoxious. And so we were going to add that one contextual command on the inventory side of that screen. But when Matthew cracked it open, he realized we're missing dozens of these things. There's lots and lots of contexts where there's an action that the player might want to perform that they can't. And so he actually, he built a spreadsheet where he was tracking like all of the different contexts. Because each time you open up the inventory in a different place, whether you're opening a supply locker or a container or a trader inventory or, your anything, the back of a vehicle, each of those is actually kind of a different screen under the surface. And so each individual action that has to be performed on one of those has to be implemented separately. And so there was just a lot of holes, things that we had missed. And so Matthew made a spreadsheet and we tracked all of the places where all the contexts and all the actions, found the places where there were holes, and then Matthew went through and just started knocking them out and putting actions where actions belong. There were some that we couldn't do because there's certain contexts where we end up using the same button to do something in one context that does something else in a different context, and we couldn't cross the streams. But for the most part, we killed most of the gaps that were there. So, like, in a vehicle, now you can drop items, looting a container, you can unequip your weapon or a weapon mod. When a supply locker's open, you can repair or salvage items in your personal inventory.
So happy about that one.
Not just in the supply locker. Yep. We actually made an entire facility action to patch the fact that we didn't have this.
It was somehow easier.
I don't know. Anyway.
Time is expensive.
Yeah, and speaking of time being expensive, I shouldn't read the entire list, but there's a whole bunch of new stuff that you can do in the inventory.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that, and one of my favorite ones is the one you mentioned where your supply lockers open, you can now repair your weapons and stuff, so that is really handy because it's really nice to not have to put it back in your locker, all deal with all the crap, so.
It'll be a month before I stop actually doing that. My instincts are so burned in. I still do I transfer directly into my trunk, and then I do it, and I'm like, no, wait, it's better now, it's fine.
Yeah. And then the last couple things we did in the inventory was when you're hitting the take one button to just grab things one at a time from a stack. It used to be that when you got to the last one, you had to switch buttons because now it's just a single item, and take one would disappear. Now that doesn't happen. You can always take one, from a stacked item. And then you get an error sound if you try to use, an item in your inventory, and you can't use it for whatever reason. It used to be there would be no sound and you'd sometimes be left wondering why your button wasn't working. So now at least something is telling you, oh no, it worked. You just can't do that.
There was a great bug once when you could use anything from your inventory and people would throw Molotovs from behind a menu and then light themselves and their cars on fire and be like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
No, I definitely appreciate all those changes because they're nice quality of life things that really make the game a lot more fun. And some of these you never even think about, but then once this happens, like, oh wow, that's really cool. Like one of my favorite ones that happened recently, it wasn't in this patch, but the ability to actually unload your ammo from your weapons, that was so huge. I love that.
Yeah, that was a favorite of mine too.
But there were some other blood plague changes, if you want to talk about those real quick.
So this one, when I think basically in Heartland, you end up needing blood plague cure so much more often because every single zombie you're fighting is a blood plague zombie, and you've got the blood plague freaks, which are always trying even harder to infect you. You need it so often that we took a really hard look at the user experience of curing the blood plague, which, when it's a rare action, it's okay if it's a little bit cumbersome, whatever, people deal with it. They don't have to deal with it that often. But if you're doing it constantly in a lot of different contexts, you want a much better set of tools. And so we improved the use of cure across the board. You can, use it under, it's basically when you're talking to somebody and you want to cure them, instead of just having like a few options take over your entire dialogue, we've shuffled them off into their own categories so you can interact with them normally or decide to cure them, because everyone's infected all the time. And so if being infected took over your dialogue, you would never be able to do anything with any of your characters. And so then you can get into it, and then they actually give you enough information to make decisions. You can see how infected they are. You can tell whether you're going to have to use a cure from your inventory or use a cure from their inventory. And so we're just trying to give you as much information as we can. And we think that it's a better experience now. And so because it worked so well in Heartland, we made sure that it worked that way across the entire game.
Yeah, and I'll have to point out my favorite one of this is the one that you can view treatment options action for your ally characters, or not your ally characters, but your community characters. So actually having that available to you is so handy, because you can walk up to them and go, oh, this person's, 70% blood plague. Maybe I should cure them now before they get blood plague.
Their body is 70% blood plague.
It's like a person-shaped bucket, 70% of which red raspberry jam.
Yeah.
That's a funny way to think of it. But yeah, I definitely appreciate that one a lot. So really appreciate those changes. Thank you.
Yeah. I can't take credit for them. I think Jurgen did them.
Well, thank you, Jurgen. And then we have one other section that had some miscellaneous changes, and you can call out any of these you'd like, but one of the ones I didn't really understand too much is where water disturbance effects no longer continue after zombies are killed.
This was just a little visual bug where if you're fighting zombies in a river or something like that, right. When a zombie's walking through the water, it has a little ripple around its legs as it's moving. And if you killed the zombie there, they would fall down in the water and the ripple would just stay there.
Yeah, like the ripple didn't know that the foot was now dead. The ripple's just like, oh no, there's still a foot moving around kind of in this area.
So there'd just be little whirlpools left behind by dead zombies. And so that's gone now. We had some of the miscellaneous stuff is just little. Do you want to mention the stabilizing foam?
Yeah, so this one bugged me a little bit. This is one of my ancient pet peeves I finally got to act on. That item was always supposed to feel a little bit broken, in terms of being too effective, but it made you go home. Because generally speaking, I always wanted there to be more reasons for players to actually go to their base and see their community at rest in a natural state. And so anytime we could incentivize you to actually travel home to use stuff, the hope is to do that. And I didn't see people talking about stabilizing foam this is this crazy broken thing. I can't believe I can just heal forever whenever I want now. And so I figured we could just make it cheap. Free. Make it free. Maybe that'll do it. And so now if you're able to get home and you have low health and you don't want to spend any meds or any consumables, you can walk up to that facility and you can use that and just full heal your current health.
Yeah.
It won't take care of injuries, won't take care of trauma, but it's as good as painkillers if you can actually go home.
And that's stabilizing foam. That's a mod, right?
Yeah, that is a mod that you can slot into your infirmary or a field hospital.
Okay, cool. Some of them hostile icons no longer come randomly unglued from characters' heads.
Yeah, that was
just
bad.
Yeah, just you'd see the little red diamond over someone's head and you'd be fighting them, and then suddenly it would just slide off to the side for no good reason.
It would just stop and you're like, wait, no, is their soul behind and the body's moving somewhere else?
Exactly. Their anger is just being
right.
left
Can
behind.
I get a headshot on their anger?
Bloater gas in a car. When you get your car bloater gassed, the bloater gas would become a damaging volume effectively for the zombies.
Right.
And it's not supposed to do that. And so your car became a more effective zombie killing machine when it was bloater gassed than otherwise. Not very effective strategy, but it just still felt weird.
You don't want to incentivize people at all to be in the car. You should get out now. You already did the bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But then my favorite patch note I've ever written.
This is pretty great.
Is knowing how to fish no longer makes you sad. And so basically somebody asked us the question. I think this came from the community. Somebody asked us, how come traits that teach you how to fish make you sad? How come they always have a morale hit on them? And I looked at them and I was like, I have no idea why that's the case. I believe that there was another designer, who doesn't work here anymore, not for some nefarious reason. He just happens not to. He went through and he was trying to find good reasons to give characters morale penalties. He was balancing the morale system, making sure there were enough penalties and enough benefits across the trait system that it would make sense. And I think that he in his mind was imagining, oh yeah, I used to go on fishing trips all the time, and now I can't. I'm sad because I'm a fisherman, and there's no fishing to do in the apocalypse.
I just assumed all fishing villages were super bleak places.
Yeah, exactly. And so I believe that there was a justification that was very personal to that designer, for why all fishermen should be sad in our game. But it didn't make a lot of sense to the audience, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me, so I just went through it and removed them all. And so now fishermen are not sad anymore. But that does kind of illustrate something that, and this, I'm kind of throwing that one designer under the bus, but really, this is a thing that every single designer experiences, which is there's something that works in your head that makes perfect sense, and it's obvious why it works the way it does. And so you don't question it because it's just, there's something in your head that tells you this is right. And you just put it in the game. And it's not until somebody else plays the game that you find out that, no, I'm a weirdo. I'm seeing the world from a completely different prismatic lens, based on my own assumptions and biases and the stories that I've told myself about the way things work. And when a normal person plays this, which, there's no such thing as a normal person, I guess, but, when somebody who's different from me plays the game, none of it makes sense.
I had some distant family in town recently, and, we had this long conversation about just, life experiences. And I remember coming out with that saying, different people's normal is super different.
Yeah.
My day-to-day and your day-to-day have something different. Blaise, I'm sure yours from ours is very different. And, there's the range of potential normal is always infinitely larger than any one person could possibly perceive. And the max confidence one can have that your experiences translate even a little bit can't be that high.
Yeah.
You just have to be prepared for other people to say,
yeah, I mean, for me, I work
why
overnight.
Does this say that?
No one really understands the overnight schedule where I have to sleep during the day. So
yeah, I did that for about a week in college once, and I was like, nope, never again. That's really rough.
It's rough, trust me. Especially having a kid too. I get to sleep a lot. So
that's really rough.
Heard that story a few times.
But there were actually multiple times when we were working on the Heartland characters where I would come up with a trait and a set of buffs or penalties for that trait that made sense to me. And there were multiple times when Andy Collins would read it because he was going to edit the final text. And he would say, I don't understand why this is working the way that it is. Why does being a high school principal give you this advantage or this disadvantage? And I was like, you know what? I had it all working in my head, but since it doesn't work for you, obviously it's not going to work for a lot of people. And so I need to go back in and either come up with a different penalty or come up with a different description for what's going on that makes more sense in people's minds. And so you always have to check your assumptions that way.
Which, since you did bring up Andy Collins, I do want to mention, I really love that Bronto gas jingle. I think it's hilarious to me. So,
we'll have to tell him that you liked it.
Yeah. Every time I hear a character say that, I'm like, this is so funny. I can't believe they actually made a Bronto gas jingle.
So now and then, actually, I'll report to Andy that somebody has said that they loved a particular line of the game. He'll be like, I have no memory of writing that. Because he's written so much dialogue for this game.
Yes. Also, not just dialogue, text.
Yeah.
Every gun description, every mail weapon description, every word on every facility has had him look at it at least once, think about it at least once, and talk to whoever wrote it at least once.
Well, I really appreciate that one. You don't hear it too often, but I've heard it a couple times now, and it's funny when I hear it. So
we'll let him know.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, but unless you have anything else to say about Heartland or the patch, that's basically all the questions I have for both of you.
Yeah, it's 4:00. We should probably get out of here anyway.
We got more video game to make. Thank you so much for having us. This is always fun.
Yeah, this is great. We love your podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if people want to get a hold of you, is there any certain way they should do so?
Yeah, I'm at Rangatang on Twitter, and I'm also on our Discord. If you go to discord.gg/Undead Labs, Brian and I both hang out there periodically, and we pay attention to what people are saying, and we like to answer them.
Yep. No, I'm at Brian Giaime, spelling of which you can see in the title of the podcast.
Yes. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I really appreciate both of you being here and taking the time to talk about this with me. I really love Heartland, and I love all the work that both of you put into it, as long as everyone else at Undead Labs. You're welcome. But I know you have to go, so I'll continue with the outro, but I appreciate you being here. So hopefully I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you. All right, thank you. Bye. But as for the podcast, we do have more episodes coming up, of course. We are going to have an episode coming up next Saturday. We release an episode every Saturday, so that is going to be a Heartland themed episode. I don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but it will be something to do with Heartland, maybe character based, maybe mission based. We'll talk about some of our favorite things from it, possibly how to take on Plague Wall, something like that. But that should be a lot of fun. Our next stream, I can't particularly say what our next stream is just yet, because I don't know quite if I'm going to release this episode the same week it was recorded. I might release this episode the week after it was recorded, so depending on when I release it, I can't really say what our next stream is going to be, but we will have our stream schedule being Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 12 to 4 Eastern, and then we're going to have one night stream every week. And I do want to call out a big thank you again to everyone that supported me so far. I really appreciate it, because we have passed 500 followers on Mixer this week, so that is huge to me. That's a really huge accomplishment, and I really, really appreciate that. So thank you everyone that's followed. Thank you everyone that's jumped on my stream. And thank you to all of you listening to the podcast, too. Even if you only listen to podcasts, you don't jump into streams, I really appreciate that, too. But, we've had some great milestones with the podcast, and now that's a really huge milestone with streaming as well. So 500 is huge, and we're going to keep going, and I'm going to keep making the podcast. I'm going to keep streaming, so I really appreciate that. Thank you. And if you are enjoying the content I'm making with both streaming and podcasting, one way to help me out is on Patreon. Patreon.com/Blaise XPerience is a way to help content creators. For as little as $1 a month, you can actually help me create the content I make, and you get exclusive rewards for doing so. There's a $1, $5, $10, and $15 level, and at the different levels, you get more rewards. Some of the rewards are like top priority to play with me on stream. You get rewards like a bonus podcast every month for Patreon members. So there's different things like that are really great rewards, and I definitely appreciate you doing that if you're able to. But if you can't, then no worries at all. The fact that you're listening to this right now, the fact that you join my streams and come say hi, that is definitely enough. So don't worry about it if you're not financially able, but that is just a way to support financially if you are able to do so. So that's patreon.com/Blaise XPerience. That's patreon.com/BLAISEXPERIENCE. Patreon.com/Blaise XPerience. But if you want to get in contact with me, you can contact me via email, blaisexperience@gmail.com. You can contact me via Twitter or my gamer tag, which is @Blaise XPerience. That's capital BLAISE, capital XPERIENCE. And then if you want to contact me on Facebook or on YouTube, I am on there as well, but I don't answer on those as frequently. I'm a little bit more frequent on Twitter and Discord, so I would say contact me on Twitter and Discord if you want a quicker response, and I usually get back to you, within a reasonable time frame there. And my Discord will be in the show notes, so just stay tuned in the show notes, and I will have my Discord in there. But if you want to find the podcast, you're obviously listening to it right now, but other ways to find it that you might not know about are Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iTunes, Radio Public, Podbean, Blueberry, and many of the directories. So literally all you have to do is just type into Google somewhere, the Blaise XPerience, and you will find us somewhere. So whatever app or podcast player is your favorite choice, just go search us on there, and you're probably going to find us. And if for whatever reason you don't like apps, in my Discord, there is a section called Direct Download Links that has a direct download link to every podcast I've ever made. So if you don't want to have an app on your phone or something, or your computer, then if you join my Discord, you can just go to the direct download section, and you can download any podcast you want just by clicking a button. But I really appreciate everyone being here, and thank you to Geoffrey and Brian who were in here and just left a couple minutes ago. I really appreciate them giving their time and answering all those questions, and it was a really fun episode, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. And I'm really excited to play more Heartland, play more State of Decay, do more podcasting, do more streaming, and all this content creation. So I really appreciate all the support so far, everyone, and we're getting closer and closer to 100, and I can't wait to get to episode 100. We'll have to do something unique and special for that. I'm not quite sure yet, but we will have to figure out something. But thank you, everyone, as always, for listening to the Blaise XPerience.